It really is an honor to be able to stand before you all, gathered in front of a group of pioneers, visionaries, and changemakers in this very important space. This week is not just about ideas, it's about action, it's about collaboration, it's about partnerships that fuel progress, and a shared commitment to overcoming the challenges that stand between innovation and impact. In that vein, we're joined by Anthony Davies for the annual Superplenary for the Advanced Therapies Week, and he'll begin with a diverse group of stakeholders with really unique and transformative experiences with cell and gene therapies. As we embark on this journey, I encourage each of you to engage, challenge assumptions, and share expertise to accelerate progress and pave the way to a healthier tomorrow. Again, thank you all for being here, particularly with the change in venue over the past year. And it is my pleasure to introduce Anthony Davies, founder and chief executive officer of Dark Horse Consulting Group, to our Superplenary session.
Thank you, Ryan, for that introduction. Thank you to the organizers of this conference. This conference has come a long way, from cold Washington, D.C., to hot Miami, to curiously cold Dallas. Although I came down the road from Colorado this morning, so I've limited sympathy for people complaining about the weather. The field of cell and gene therapy has also come a long way in that period of time. I tell this joke often, but it's a good joke, so I'm going to tell it again. When I was in the field of cell and gene therapy early in my career, we referred to cell and gene as the future of medicine, and destined to stay that way forever. But about 10 years ago, the future arrived in the commercial approvals of Kymriah, then Yescarta, and Luxturna. And those three products have paved the way for, well, depending on how you count, some 20 or 30 plus FDA approvals of discrete entities, never mind line extensions, and so forth. So tonight I bring you a message of not good news, but great news. The funding situation for companies is pretty good. Certainly a lot better than it was 1 or 2 years ago. The IPO window is open. It may not be flapping in a gale force wind, but it's certainly open, it's not closed. And as we all know, the biotech industry as a whole, and cell and gene in particular, is uniquely dependent on the free flow of initial public offerings on stock markets around the world, but especially here in the United States. The rate of FDA and other global jurisdictions' approvals of cell and gene therapy has never been better. It's increased linearly for multiple years now. And as we stand at the beginning of 2025, it's now immediately clear to all of us that Scott Gottlieb's projections from back in 2019 of 10 or more discrete cell and gene therapy approvals per year from now on will be met and will continue to be met. Scott kind of nailed it with uncanny accuracy 6 years ago, and that's exactly where we are now. More great news. And now the bad news. The commercial approvals, which we have seen in this field over the past several years, have been dismal. I'm not going to name names. I don't have to. This is always the quickest slide for me to put together when I put slides together on this subject, because if you Google disappointing cell gene approval, 50 articles come up. We don't know why this is, but we do know where the solution will lie. The solution will lie, I'd like to summarize it for you. There are 3 P's involved here. Patients. You can't develop and launch a product without the patients. You can't force patients to take a drug, and you can't develop a drug that patients don't need. Physicians. You can't treat a patient without physicians. If the physicians are not on your side and educated about the true value, the real world value of the drugs we're developing, then that won't be there for the patients to take. In fact, the 3rd P is the payers. We all know there is a price problem in this field. If this problem is not solved, the virtuous cycle of investment will be broken, If the brave and pioneering investors in this field 10 to 15 years ago do not see margin, do not see profit, and do not see a reasonable return on their investment, the investments will not be renewed. The cycle will break, and we will all have been wasting our time here for the last 10 years. These problems are solvable. I don't wish to point them out in a negative sense, but there is only one priority for everybody in this room in this field today, and that is to ensure that the upcoming round of commercial launches are very significantly, and I never say very, are very significantly better than the ones we have seen recently. And for that, we will need payers, patients, and physicians. Tonight, you'll hear from all of those three angles, from multiple individuals. We've got a great cast of characters to come on the stage tonight, none of whom you've seen on this stage before. We've got a patient, Donavon Decker. We've got patient access, Sarah Creviston from Novartis. We've got a founder of a foundation, Yuliia Sanko from Timosha Smile, and we've got Wiinberg from the business side at the Novo Nordisk Foundation. We're going to have 15-minute chats with each. We are not going to hold back. If we wish to, we will name names, and we'll take names. So on that basis, it's my pleasure first to welcome Donavon Decker, who's an LGM DT2 patient, to join me on the stage. Donavon, welcome.
Welcome.
The patient perspective is one of the three legs to the stool that I mentioned. What I'd like to do, I know we have a lot of, actually some common experiences in the development of gene therapies, but I'd just like to give you a couple of minutes to introduce yourself and how did you get involved in the field of gene therapy?
My name is Donavon Decker. I was the first person in the world to do gene therapy with a guy by the name of Dr. Jerry Mendel. I learned about this from the Quest magazine that MDA put out. And I went to Columbus, Ohio, and I met Dr. Mendel, and I had a lot of questions. And the thing that Dr. Mendel really stressed to me was doing this. He says, I want to make sure you know two things. First of all, you're not going to get any help from this trial because it's a safety trial. The second thing you need to know, it's AAV, and if you get treated, then you're not going to be able to be retreated again. Well, I did the gene therapy because in my family, there's 8 kids. 5 of us have the limb-girdle 2D. My sister, who does not have the disease, has 2 daughters with 2I. So there's 7 members in my family with the disease. And so that's why I did it. And I just think that anybody in my shoes probably would have done the same thing. But I just think Dr. Mendel was there to answer every question, every concern. And I just think that going forward, it's going to be some good things happening.
You mentioned something very interesting, which is that currently almost all gene therapies are not amenable to repeat dosing. And some patient reluctance has been seen with even commercial products because you have to ask this question, well, when do I play this card? Do I play it today with this chance of success or low chance of success? Or do maybe I hold the card and I play it in 5 years' time or 10 years' time when there's a better vector, a better technology? When do you play that card? What would you say to people today?
To people today, I would say, if I had the opportunity to do gene therapy, I would do it today. I say that because I know one of the patients, and my sister June, when they went to the vascular delivery, I couldn't do it because of the AAV. I had a titer 14 years later. And my sister June was the first person in the world to do vascular delivery. And I think now, if I had a chance to do the gene therapy, I would do it. I would encourage patients to get involved, especially now where you're going to possibly see it's advanced far enough to where you can see some actual help. And there's one patient that was treated in my sister's trial that's living a normal life. you'd never know this person had muscular dystrophy. And you won't find anybody more positive than me on gene therapy. But I do think there needs to be something different. And that's why I've actually co-founded a company that's working on non-viral gene therapy. And to me, that's going to be the future. I know there's billions of dollars into AAV, but we need something better and we need something cheaper to do it with.
We'll come back to that second point, one of my favorite and least favorite subjects. But I'd like to, we want to talk about the future, but I'd also like to look to the past. If you don't study history, you're doomed to repeat it. And for me, as a young scientist in the field, one of the most formative moments was the case of Jesse Gelsinger. I was working on an adenovirus vector myself at the time, and the news of the Gelsinger event was a massive shockwave through the field. It really put gene therapy into the wilderness, I think, for 10 years.
Yeah.
I'm really interested to hear your perspective. Perhaps you can just give a little bit of background for the audience about the death of Jesse and the effect it had.
That was, as most everybody knows, was the most critical thing that ever happened in gene therapy. I had my gene therapy 2 weeks before Jesse died. And I truly believe that there would not be gene therapy in muscular dystrophy if we would have not got done before that. So we made it by 2 weeks. And I always thank MDA for that, because they did it, and Dr. Mendel and all. But the effect that Jesse's death had, you could not, when I was working with Dr. Mendel trying to find money to get into gene therapy, they'd say, hey, somebody died. We don't want to touch this. And even MDA, I was on the segment for the gene therapy. They didn't want to talk about gene therapy for a long time. To me, the thing that you said 10 years, I think the death of gene therapy for Jesse's death really till about 14, 15 years. The money, there was a little bit of money that came in around 2006, 2010 area, but it really wasn't until Sparks Therapeutic had some success in the eye. And then when Dr. Mendel and Dr. Brian Casper had success with the SMA, that's what opened the doors for the gene therapy, in my opinion.
I agree. I think that the Zolgensma story is one of the most compelling in the entire field. And I will say, that was a successful commercial launch.
Right.
It was a small patient population, but it was, I think, perfectly executed. Were you talking to Jerry Mendel throughout the Gelsinger event?
Yeah. I still talk to Dr. Mendel. He's a great friend. And I got to go to his celebration in Columbus, but Dr. Mendel really worked hard to get the gene therapy back on track. And it is, one of my things I like to say is the SMA and the Duchenne, that came out of the trial that I started. And that's pretty cool.
Yeah. Looking forward, tell us, well, actually, first, I'd like you to talk a little bit about your time at the NIH, because I think that's a very interesting role you had for some 6 years on the coordinating committee for muscular dystrophy.
The Muscular Dystrophy Coordinating Committee came out of the MD CARE Act, which I helped lobby for, and a bunch of other people in the community did. But 6 years on that, the government really wasn't doing much for muscular dystrophy, because I remember at the hearing that I testified at, Senator, I can't remember the name right now, but he said, I thought MDA was taking care of this. Well, it's a lot bigger than MDA. And so the MD CARE Act really set the plan up to help get the money started. But it also brought, one of the key things I think the MD CARE Act is, it gave grants to the researchers to come into the field. And when you're talking rare and ultra-rare diseases, that's such a key point. You need to bring people into the field. And that was part of the first 10-year plan that the MD Care Act did and the Muscular Dystrophy Coordinating Committee.
And now tell us about Angle Therapeutics.
Angle Therapeutics is a company that a couple of my siblings and a researcher, Dr. Munko Lek at Yale University, we're focusing on non-viral gene therapy. I really think that non-viral someday will outpace viral, but what we have, we're just starting out. Our scientific advisory committee, I think, is as good as anybody in the world, really, for that, because Munko Lek, Dr. Sharon Hesterly, who's the head of research at MDA, Dr. Casey Childers, who helped build the AskBio program for 2I. We have Dr. Lindsay Ott, who's an assistant professor at Wichita State University. And we have Dr. Nicholas Johnson, who's at Virginia Commonwealth University. And he's doing the natural history on limb-girdle. And like I said, we're just starting out. We've talked to a couple of companies. We have 2 companies that we're negotiating a term sheet with to do a proof of concept study. And once we get that, then we'll be moving forward after that.
I think what I'd like to back into now ultimately is a discussion of price and maybe a discussion of cost. But I think rare and ultra rare is this fascinating field where the need is extremely obvious. Rare and ultra rare diseases often have a monogenic root cause, which makes them particularly suitable for gene therapies. And yet the cost of developing a therapy for a handful of people is, honestly not that much different from the cost of developing a therapy for many, many people. And obviously the financial return from one is going to be very different from the other. Now, we have a great case study in Zolgensma and SMA, spinal muscular atrophy. But it's rather a single example so far. And Zolgensma has been with us for quite a number of years.
Mm-hmm. I just think that it's really hard. In a way, for me, it's hard to put a price on a life. I've lost 3 sisters to this disease. And there's got to be a way to figure out the pricing. And the reason I think, and the reason why we're started our company is non-viral, I think, is going to be a lot cheaper than viral. Right now, you have one shot with the viral. And even if they come up with the redosing, I don't think it's going to be viable because of the payer. I don't think a payer is going to pay for more than one chance with AAV. And I know of some patients that have needed more. My sister got help for about a year and a half. And she needs it again. And I don't think a payer's going to do it. They won't approve it right now, I don't think.
I have to agree with you. Not trying to be funny, but if we have one expensive drug, then let's develop another expensive drug and let's redose. That's not going to solve the problem. I do agree with you. I think, personally, I think that the viral therapies are great. Many of them work. They're there. They've established the precedent. But I don't think anybody's going to argue that unless the cost basis is reduced and the value is demonstrated, then the field will not grow in the way that it should. So just as we close up now, I told you it would go quickly. I'd like to ask you, what your message is to healthcare and biotech leaders when it comes to patient engagement. Perhaps I'd like to challenge you to think not just about the clinical trials, but at the point of commercial launch. I feel that some of the commercial launches have been into patient populations that have not been sufficiently engaged even in the trial period. So when the product is launched, there isn't that strong engagement with the patient community.
I agree with that, but one other thing I see is the infrastructure's not there. The infrastructure to do the gene therapy is not there. And I just think that if patients are involved from the beginning, I think patients should be going to the FDA with the companies or their advocates, because if you engage the patients from the beginning, then it's going to be better for the companies, it's going to be better for the patients because the patients group will be there. But one thing I have seen is patients a lot of times are yes people and they won't stand up. But I want to close with this. I had a friend that posted on Facebook and he said this: if I had to bet on who wins the challenges of life and the persistence in seeking a goal, I would put all my chips on Donavon. You make us work harder to share your challenges. And that came from my friend, Dr. Jerry Mendel.
Ladies and gentlemen, Donavon and his cohorts are the true pioneers of the field of cell and gene therapy. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. You know, Donavon, it would be great if we could talk to somebody from a major pharmaceutical company who's focused in the field of patient access.
I agree. I'd like a few minutes with them.
Do you know anyone? Oh, please come join us on the stage. This is Sarah Creviston. She's Global Vice President of Patient Access and Government Affairs from a small, promising company called Novartis.
Thanks, Anthony.
Yes. What is patient access?
It is a number of things, and all of them are equally important. Starting with, and Donavon, thank you for championing for everyone else, not only for the therapies, but also just for the engagement. So patient engagement, patient activation, patient access is when we were, so I've been the privilege of launching for the past 5 years Zolgensma for SMA.
Good job.
Thank you. There's a number of people who have contributed to that. And what we had at our company was a very tight group across all of our functions. And my background primarily has been government policy. I've built and led 3 global government affairs organizations, mainly in biotech. And then it's so interrelated, then I actually took over leading patient advocacy. And having that skill sets together is extremely effective, particularly if you're in a smaller organization or in a launch mode. And we worked so closely, so it was patient advocacy, market access, our medical teams, and of course our commercial teams. And I would say our integration with our medical teams and our market access, because you should not underestimate the impact that individual patients, the families, or the patient organizations can have. I always say they're the most effective voice for change. You just need to form these partnerships in order to empower everyone. And you said it first, Anthony, is that you should not be developing your drug at all without having the patient voice engaged, because you're gonna learn, even if they're telling you something that you might not wanna hear, it's better finding that out now than going to FDA, because they're gonna hear it there anyway, right? And EMA. And it's better to be building that along the way. So that's how SMA came together. And that's why the infrastructure was so strong as we were getting to launch, because they were involved all the way in the beginning. And the reason why we were so closely integrated with our market access and our medical teams is because, this is a very new environment. Everyone's learning. Most of the payer and policymakers were not familiar or didn't know how to deal with a one-time therapy. Their systems were not set up. HTA systems were not set up for this. So what I'm also very proud of our team, and Tay Salamila is here, and you'll hear from him. He's one of my best partners that we were together launching this therapy, is the ability to be humble, approaching every stakeholder, because everyone is learning, everyone's figuring out. And if you come at it from that perspective, then you're open and they're open to ways to creatively come up with different solutions. We also had the support of Novartis to have the leeway to come up with some innovative solutions and different contracting, and the ability to come up with initiatives, like my team was responsible for initiating getting newborn screening. Because with a gene therapy, the earlier that you can treat, the less of the disease you alleviate. But then also the payers and the governments realize those savings as well when you're taking away some of the disability and the long-term treatment of the chronic therapies. So all of that worked together. So we had initiatives that we could partner with our patient organizations, not just on the drug. We had partnerships where we were all advocating for early access or newborn screening. And I would say that is what has made it part of the success of the launch of building the infrastructure for Zolgensma.
Did you encounter misconceptions? Were there trust issues? I know what the answer is to both of those questions, but as you did, let me rephrase the questions. As you encountered misconceptions, as you encountered mistrust, how do you approach education? Especially with, we'll spend half of this evening talking about children's diseases, and you're the first part of that, especially with a population as vulnerable, in a sense, as children, and very young children in your case.
Yes, the trust on a couple of different levels. One is the trust of the innovation. And this, I say, wherever along the continuum you are in your development, or you're launching, or you're trying to get a partnership, or maybe get acquisition, when a patient or a parent decides to take your therapy, they're playing the long game. It is a lifelong decision. And particularly for your child, you're making that decision. Now, with SMA, it's very rapidly progressing, and that created a lot of the sense of urgency across all of our stakeholders. But still, you have to be able to create an environment with your own company and the partnerships where it's transparent and they can trust of what you're building together going forward to make that decision to engage with you. And then they also need to be able to trust the delivery, the clinic, the site that you're building, and the expertise and the support, particularly when you're getting into other countries. And we're in almost over 45 countries now, and a number of those countries needed to build that infrastructure. Well, that goes into the parent or the patient's decision is, can I trust this infrastructure? Will I have the support after I get the therapy? What does that look like? And what happens after that? So our company actually had to start building that as well, because when these first launched, it's one time. But it is a one-time therapy, but you do have to have continued support for the family or the patient, regardless of what the impact would be, because then you're going to optimize the impact of the therapy. It doesn't just stop at the therapy.
How old were you when you first got into a trial? Not to be.
I was 35, I think.
So you were playing a long game,
Yeah.
but not as long as the patients of an SMA,
That's right.
the parents of an SMA.
Right. So it's varied degrees. That's what you really need to understand about your therapy and the unmet need is what kind of decisions is the patient making, and where are they in their life phase of making a decision in order to go forward or not.
Right. I see that as probably the most critical thing I know it is for SMA, you know that. But for limb-girdle 2D, I still think the earliest you get it, the better off you'll be. Even if you're only showing some minimal sign or no sign at all. And if you know, like a family member, if you have it, I would try to get treated right away.
And were you local to Ohio State? Did you already know of the place, or was that another step into a new world for you?
Say that again?
Were you local to Ohio State when you were enrolled?
I was from here in South Dakota, so it was about, well, I flew, so it was a couple-hour flight and the commercials and all that. Mm-hmm. And that's one thing with patients, to go to trials, you don't realize how much they sacrifice to get into a trial, and most of them pay for a lot of their own travel. That's a big cost.
Were you involved in the early trials of SMA?
No, I came right at the launch of
the commercial
the US. Yes.
So there must have been some stories.
Oh, yes. Yes. And but I was very involved in our intrathecal application, which you saw some of the data is just starting to come out that we're really excited about. So I and my team were very involved in getting country organization because we had to go outside of the US because we needed previously untreated patients, which is a whole thing in rare disease, which is a whole nother discussion.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So what's the roadmap now forward for, Zolgensma, probably one of the most successful gene therapies to date in history. What have you learned? What has Novartis learned? What has the community learned? What has the rare disease community learned, which can start to map out a roadmap for more highly successful commercial launches where a massive proportion of the SMA patients in the world is now being treated, right?
And what a great thing, right? I mean, what a great thing to find these children in these countries and provide this. And what I would say what we learned is to never underestimate a country, because we were always pretty surprised at what countries would do in order to, one, try to be on the forefront of innovation. Actually, they want to try to leapfrog into this new paradigm. And they just need to know how to do it, and then how can they work out the economics for their country. When it's a rare disease, they don't have that many. So the challenge becomes, how many will they have, and then how do you find them? And that was my job to try to get it, because if the government has got a screening program, you're going to find them, and then you're looking at how fast you can get them treated and what the support is. So you don't have to spend the infrastructure and the time on the front end trying to find them. Is very helpful. So a roadmap is beginning. We're still a long way to go, but there is infrastructure building in countries with the treatment centers. Ours is a one-time treatment, so we're able to train up multiple centers in a country to build that expertise. And they actually want to be viewed as being a center for that expertise. CAR-T has a whole nother dynamic to this. So I think the evolution in how we can make that more efficient is something that everyone's working on. But governments also got a lot more experience as we were going through this. So there's more expertise. Now, expectations are kind of set. So if you have to be really clear on what are the outcomes, and then what's the opportunity to partner in order to help build their infrastructure. But in a number of countries, a lot of this infrastructure is in place. You just have to build the partnerships across each of the stakeholders in order to move something forward. It's not easy. And a lot of times you're going to need to partner. You don't have to do all that by yourself. There's a lot of coalitions. We built coalitions for early screening that are existing in some of these countries to say, what we always tried to do, and I know Tay will say the same thing, is we didn't go into a country just for Zolgensma. We all went in really looking at trying to advance gene therapy. And whatever we were trying to do in terms of regulation or legislation that needed to be passed, that it was hopefully setting a precedent so not only our future gene therapies could come through, but it would really try to advance the entire field. And I'll tell you, we were really pleasantly surprised also what countries would do. When their HTA systems were not set up for a one-time therapy, we had a number of countries, Russia was one of them, that created completely new funds, completely new rare disease funds that we could temporarily go through to create access, and they could learn. And as they worked on the longer term transformation of their healthcare systems.
So how would you grade, in terms of equity globally, for access? What grade would you give yourself at the moment? What grade would you give the field at the moment in achieving global patient equity for access to these diseases?
I think we're probably C-.
Oh, that's harsh.
In terms of global equity, because even if you get approval in a country, it doesn't mean they have access.
Yeah. No, I think we all agree with that, but it's a C- given with love, right?
A lot of love, a lot of optimism about the possibility, and just the message of just keep persevering, and it is coming. I am just so excited, and it's been such a privilege to be a part of being on the front end of this happening, and we're all a part of this biotech revolution that's happening right now. And so it's extremely optimistic, but it's not going to be that easy.
I think we're all so pleased with the success of Zolgensma. I think it makes us all really hungry for more. We hope that Zolgensma was just the appetizer. Mm-hmm. I think that the global spread of this product has been really just fantastic, best in class. Dealing with a pediatric population is possibly the most amazing attribute of this drug. We've already heard from Donavon that bad things can happen in clinical trials. With Jesse Gelsinger, who was, what was he 18 or 19?
He was 18, I believe.
18 at the time of his treatment and death. You've what's the oldest patient that's been treated with Zolgensma?
Probably, it's weight-based outside the US, so maybe around 7 to 9 years old.
7 to 9 years old. So when bad things happen in clinical trials, and the clinical trials involve children, the potential for distress and heartbreak is doubled down on. And on that basis, I'd like you to welcome our next speaker, who's Yuliia Sanko. And Yuliia Sanko is the founder of Timosha Smile, and will give us her perspective on pediatric oncology in this field. Welcome. Thank you very much. Yuliia, welcome. I think we've just heard we've heard 2 inspiring stories so far, so let's see if we can make it 3. Yuliia, please give yourself a brief introduction to yourself and to Timosha Smile.
My name is Yuliia Sanko, and it's amazing because today I represent patient also, and your pain born something incredible and hope for another people. Also our pain, because our foundation called Timosha Smile, and everybody who hears this, I'm from Ukraine. That's because my English with accent. And when somebody hears Timosha Smile, all times they ask, is it a company of dentists? And I say, no, it's about my son. We call him Timosha. And when he was 6 years old, he was diagnosed with leukemia. And we start treatment in Ukraine. After that, we ran to Belarus, and after that, we ran to Italy. And we was impressed because difference in everything in these 3 countries create something in my heart. And we start therapy, everything okay. It's amazing, and all staff, all doctor, all nurses, with dignity. They look to us with dignity. It's something new for me. And we start our therapy, chemo, and everything okay, but after 4 months, there was relapse, and all doctors have meeting and ask me to come in, and they advised me CAR-T cell therapy, and it was very expensive. And I speak with my husband, okay, let's sell our kidney and do this. But this foundation where we had treatment pay for us, and they apply in US CAR-T therapy. This therapy, this medicine was in hospital. But my Timosha passed away 4 days before our appointment to take this therapy. And after that, it crushed everything in my life. And I tried to start help in other children. Don't be late. Don't be late. And we start our foundation. Timosha smiled because when Timosha looked from heaven to us, what we do here, he smiled. And we start very big project in Ukraine to build first private clinic to treat leukemia. And it will be first Christian clinic. In Ukraine, there is no private clinic for treat children cancer. And during the war, when war started, we have collaborated with our Italian clinic with Centro Maria Letizia Verga when we have treatment. And they called me and asked me, please we don't know anybody in Ukraine, just you and the organization. We trust you. Be like bridge to Ukrainian children with cancer to Italy for free treatment. And today, 113 children with cancer already evacuated from Ukraine. Our organization, Timosha Smile, already evacuated. And most of them have CAR-T therapy. Most of them, maybe 40 or 50 child come back home with good health, and it's amazing. Also, our organization and we support parents who lost their children through cancer. And also we support and have a meeting with parents who now in treatment with their child.
In the field of patient engagement, as you know, I've talked to people like Donavon, people like Tom Whitehead and Emily, and their friends and colleagues in their foundation. It always amazes me how much support patient engagement gets from families who have actually lost their patient, not just the families for whom the therapy has worked.
Because we know how feeling in other parents, and these parents believe us because we understand them.
Yeah, I think you must have experienced this with SMA patients.
Absolutely.
And you were not wishing to be late there either.
No, not even a day. And you're so right. The most trusted source of comparison or information is parent to parent or patient to patient through your Facebook, social media.
Yeah.
The interconnectedness and the speed of which your networks are set up, one, amazingly effective, and that's where you trust where the information is coming from. We are partners in that, but that is the place where people trust, especially with these innovative therapies. If someone's been through it, and then you have a support in order to get through it.
There's levels of commitment. There's joining a safety trial, where you are told there will be no therapeutic benefit. That's one level of commitment, which is frankly amazing. It makes sense logically, but if it's you, I imagine it feels a little different. There's the commitment to being in a clinical trial where there may be therapeutic benefit, but there's the possibility of adverse events. up to and including death. And then there's the roadmap forward to when these products become relatively common commercial entities. Another story I like to make people reflect on is the launch of Herceptin, a drug for breast cancer, which was approved now some 30 plus years ago. And overnight, the view changed. Before Herceptin, you prayed that your breast cancer was HER2 negative. After Herceptin, you prayed that your breast cancer was HER2 positive, because Herceptin was so transformational in treating that subset of disease. And I think now that what we want to impart to patients is the thought that you are relieved at your diagnosis rather than filled with dismay at your diagnosis. Your DMD variant, you're lucky it's the variant that has this genetic therapy, or your B-cell lymphoma, you're lucky it has the CAR-T with the right target to engage it, or with your monogenic rare disease like SMA, SME, one day it'll be one of the diseases of that sort for which there is a cure. But how do you see, as we move now, you were at the very early stages of pediatric oncology and its interactions with cell therapy. Tell us what you would like the roadmap to look like in the future.
Dignity in every corner in our hospital, because now I understand we can have dignity in hospital room. Also, we need to have dignity when have dignity die. It's important for us, for parents who lost. It's important. First of all, it's dignity, and second, innovation therapy. Second, just second, and good relation to patient. Not doctor like king, and patient like slave.
Patients, physicians, and payers. Obviously, where you come from, there are real economic constraints. On a case-by-case basis, that can be solved by charity, by philanthropy. But at the end of the day, that is not scalable. And I'm interested in all of your thoughts about this. Even SMA, the price tag was high, but the price tag multiplied by a small number of patients is not an insane amount of money. A high price tag multiplied by a large number of patients is an insane amount of money. And in the long term, that's not going to work. So I think in terms of some of the recent commercial launches we've seen, these things have come together, all of these things have come together in a bad way. Poor patient engagement, poor physician reluctance because of perceived payer reluctance because of the high price tag. So I think bringing these three Ps together is, again, the thing that has to be done. But specifically, Yuliia, from your background, not necessarily even specifically to your country, but in Eastern Europe, which is not the wealthiest part of the world, what's the roadmap for, as we heard earlier, for broadening equity of access, making it available to everybody who needs it?
You mean how much children have disease?
Yeah, and how that's going to be dealt with larger numbers of children.
Every year we have 450 new leukemia disease. And, they have good health also in Ukraine, but we want to help, we want to do better. Better, when patient in the center.
Yeah. I have to ask, is Ukraine on your list?
Oh, yeah. I was just thinking back. We did a lot of work when there was a lot of massive evacuations because our parents of the SMA children were in wheelchairs and they couldn't get on the trains. right? So we worked with the patient organizations
Familiar with that situation?
and got them, into other countries and just worked really hard. And Ukraine, in the midst of everything, enacted newborn screening for SMA to set the ground to get ready for the treatment. Yeah, it's amazing. Heroes working there.
We are ready, really.
Yeah, exactly.
We are ready.
Exactly. That's what one of the most important functional areas to get early is understanding your market access strategy and what does it look like, because each of these gene therapies is different, and it's not all urgent babies perishing from SMA. And so the payers and the governments are going to have different experiences with you based on their perception of the unmet medical need. It's not all equal in the unmet medical need. And so what is that case for your particular therapy that will be of benefit over the long term with your partners and the governments and the payers? That has to be mapped out. It's not all the same. But again, to be flexible in those conversations of what could that look like over the long term for them.
You got involved before early, considerably before early. You got involved fairly early, and you joined at the point of commercialization. But this issue of market access, of being able to clearly articulate the value, the real world value of your product, anyone who wants to, talk to me about timing and when that process should start. And it's not a trick question.
Yeah. As early as possible internally in your pipeline, because there's a lot you can do.
You can't just say as early as possible.
I would go, we probably start phase 2, looking at it. Proof of concept, and that's why the market access teams need to be at the table. They need to take a look, and they don't need to be a standing member, but they need to take a look and then map out externally what this looks like going forward. And then the real engagement with your payer conversations in the US, it's before 2 years. Yeah.
So you're thinking about, so you have your phase 1 safety trial. It's safe. Maybe a hint of efficacy, but enough reason to advance into a phase 2 trial. And right there, you start thinking about real world value, market access, pricing, reimbursement, even as you're engaging with new patient groups.
Yeah, absolutely. And can I just make a point about the real world evidence? We had an unusual situation for myself and most of our organization is that Zolgensma was approved in the US with a label that was much higher than our data, which seems like a dream, and it was for our patients, absolutely. But a lot of the payer systems are not set up for that. And physicians don't have the data in order to make the case to get access to the label and the reimbursement. So that's where having the capability of getting real world evidence is extremely important and invaluable, particularly if you find yourself in that situation, but also over the long term, collecting real world data, especially in rare disease, is foundational.
Yuliia, you're now residing in the United States?
Yes.
And you're continuing your advocacy work and your educational efforts in the United States?
Yes. Now we have some collaboration with Italian clinic, and they accept our doctors. When we open our clinic, they accept our doctors to study in their clinic for free. They give us this opportunity. And also I have some connect in US, but I want to have more connections. Please found me in a booth and to have some, collaboration with American hospital to teach us how we can do this better in Ukraine.
Well, welcome to the United States, and thank you so much for all of your contributions, and we wish you all the best in the future. Thank you. You've heard from an individual patient. You've heard from a senior executive at a very large global pharmaceutical company. You've heard from an individual forming a growing foundation. There are now some very large foundations involved in this field and with major money behind them. And on that basis, I'd like to welcome our final panelist tonight, which is Bo Wiinberg, who's the Chief Business Officer from the Novo Nordisk Foundation Cellerator.
Hey, Bo, nice to meet you.
Welcome, Bo.
Thank you, Anthony.
Novo Nordisk. The name sounds familiar these days.
It does.
And so congratulations to all of you on your success. But tell us exactly where the Cellerator fits into this. Introduce yourself and your relationship with the field of cell and gene therapy, which I think is very interesting.
Yeah. So first of all, I was actually on stage this morning as well. So for those of you who have seen me before, it's not the first time I'm here. But yeah, so Novo Nordisk, as you say, has had a windfall lately, but actually within stem cells and cell therapies, Novo Nordisk and the foundation have been present for more than 2 decades, supporting basic research, mostly actually. And then that has developed into the Novo Nordisk pharmaceutical company, moving into therapies, and then lately a strategic initiative within a greater kind of area that's called regenerative medicine within the foundation that focuses on kind of saying what can we do to enable that these therapies actually get to patients. Not from a commercial perspective, but more from what can we do to kind of build networks, evolve the field, mature the ecosystem on different parallel streams to make sure that the patients get access to these types of therapies. And my own background is that I actually have a translational background. I have a PhD in science. I've worked in Novo Nordisk for many years, also in the stem cell area, heading up strategy and operations there. Then out doing some startups, and then back in the foundation when this initiative started, because I thought it's fantastic to be able to be in a position where we can help to bring these types of therapies to patients, and really privileged to be working with this.
So tell us a bit more about the Cellerator model, and with a specific reference.
Yeah.
I think what we've heard from everybody this evening is the need for speed. And I think I'm right in saying that acceleration of progress is intrinsic to the Cellerator. So bringing access to patients, everyone who spends any time with me knows that I love INDs and clinical trials, but I love BLAs and commercial launches even more, because that is when patients truly have access to a product, in principle at least. Then if they need the product, it can be prescribed to them, rather than having to gain access to a clinical trial. So tell us about how the Cellerator accelerates.
Yeah, so we're in the phase of building it, so it's not there yet, I have to say that. But the idea came around when we were actually developing these types of therapies in the pharmaceutical setting. And a lot of those projects actually take an outset in academic projects. And then when you look at those type of projects, they're very immature compared to what you need in a pharmaceutical setting to accelerate them to clinical trials. And so we discussed a lot, what can we do to kind of make sure that the products that are ready for a pharmaceutical muscle to drive them through a product development is actually more ready and fit for purpose. And that's where the Cellerator came in. So the idea of the Cellerator is basically to go out and meet these projects very, very early and build an infrastructure that can support them. So one thing is the physical infrastructure about building a facility that can actually do the process development, translate an academic process to something that is by CMC actually fit for manufacturing for a clinical trial. But it's also all the knowledge that goes into making the right choices at the right times, because that is extremely difficult and complex to navigate. And if we get some of these things right, for example, choosing the right cell line, we saw projects that we brought into Novo Nordisk where we had to change the cell line. That takes a couple of years, costs a few $1 million, and you don't want to do that too often, right? That feeds straight into what it costs to develop the whole product in the end. That fits straight into the pricing discussion that you were into, right? So whatever we can do to build knowledge, to build understanding, to build an infrastructure that can support these types of projects along the way, then they make the right choices, which brings down pricing, which accelerates the process of getting to patients and through the clinical trials. So it's also about, understanding the regulatory environment as that develops, so that you can make sure that when you then get to those discussions with the regulators, there won't be too many surprises at that stage. So there are a lot of elements that go into this building the accelerator. But first and foremost, it's a physical facility that we're building in Copenhagen that can incubate these type of projects and help them navigate this so that they get to patients as fast as possible.
So you have the audience tonight. You have an educated, diverse audience from all over cell and gene therapy. What are the biggest challenges that you're seeing? You can look backwards now, some 10, 15 years in the modern age of cell and gene therapy. And as you look backwards and then look forwards, what are the biggest challenges in the development of cell and gene therapies that you are seeking to solve?
There are a lot of issues that have been, of course, when you're in a new field, a lot of the things on the starting materials, the raw materials, the technologies that you're using to develop these types of drug are not actually truly fit for purpose, right? A lot of it is modulated based on knowledge and learning from developing small molecules and biologics, and then trying to translate that and adapt that to be able to develop these type of products. And so what we're seeing now is actually technologies that are starting to be developed specifically for this purpose. Unfortunately, we don't have too much data yet to prove that those technologies actually work, because not a lot of these products have actually been brought to patients yet. So we don't know what is actually the most efficient and most successful. But as this matures and progresses, we can make some of those right choices, right? And bring that into play as we develop these types of drugs. Of course, there are a lot of things about AI, machine learning, and other things, automation that are also relevant as the field progresses. But I don't see those as the most critical parts to bring into play right now. You can easily do better than the first generation drugs by making some of those right choices and knowing what's right to do.
And so this is a private organization. What relationship do you see between private organizations and public organizations as the field advances?
So I think not just private, public, but partnerships in general. I think that we approach this very much from a partnership perspective. We envision that the Cellerator will be very much built on partnerships in general. So this is both to the public about making sure that there is access to universities and other public entities to use this, hospitals to use the technology and know-how. But it's also about talking to the private players in the field, pharmaceutical companies, biotechs, startups, but also technology developers. Ideally, this would be a knowledge hub where you have access to these types of technologies, to this type of know-how, where there is an exchange of knowledge. So if not, the Cellerator staff and team has the knowledge and the know-how, then at least we can connect people with the right knowledge and know-how. And I think so what we're doing right now is very much looking for partners about what does it actually take to bring operational excellence. We have an idea from Novo Nordisk from developing these types of drugs, but that's perhaps not the best way to do it. So it's important to go out and talk to people around the world and say, so how are you doing it? What does good look like from different perspectives? And then bring that into play in a facility like this. So there are a lot of different levels of partnerships that we are trying to talk to. But I think it's important that when you also talk about partnerships, it's not a financial transaction. It's something that is valuable to both parties, but for different reasons than money. So it's important to find those common ground where we say we're actually doing this for a greater good or for a common purpose. And then for those who have a commercial purpose, maybe the monetary gain is down the road somewhere, but not completely clear when they enter into these types of partnerships.
And I'm also interested in your thoughts about governmental, federal organizations. I think, all governments want their people to be healthy, okay? But all governments have financial limitations. So whether it's how much funding NIH gets, whether it's the regulation of commercialized drugs by pharmaceutical companies, whether it's interactions of national governments with groups such as yours. Where does the foundation sit relative to national and international federal organizations?
We're of course pretty big, so we have pretty good access. And I say within this field, we have a lot of dialogue, both on a national level, where there is really, really good interaction. And I think that they recognize that they're also on a learning journey, which is really, really good. So we can have a really early interaction and dialogue about what does good look like. On a more international level, primarily with EMA, we also have access to that and try to understand and navigate that so that we agree on what good looks like. I think we have a lot of issues with access in Denmark, and especially related to pricing. Yes, you can get the drug approved, but actually something like Zolgensma is very, very limited use in Denmark because of the pricing. And that's really, really sad to be in that situation where you sit there and have an interaction, or where the payers actually choose to say, what is the value of this drug? It's not the individual life they're looking at, but unfortunately it's what else can we use the money on, because we have limited funds. So we need to bring those prices down so that does not become an issue going forward, right?
Yeah, somebody once explained to me that, well, if you're bringing an expensive drug to the market, don't talk about how expensive your drug is and what it can do, but talk about when your drug is approved, how much money will that save the healthcare system? Mm-hmm. In the case of gene therapies, the lifetime care costs versus the very expensive single shot. And then I think it becomes more of a cash flow problem than a cash problem.
Unfortunately, in Denmark, they don't do those calculations. Actually, they don't do the kind of lifetime. How much are you saving by? And that's a little strange. But so there's also an educational thing or a discussion politically about how do you actually calculate that value in a lifetime setting.
I mean, I see it as a pretty basic thing in some ways. I mean, who can afford to buy a house? Who can write a check for a house tomorrow?
Yeah.
But who can afford a mortgage? Well, a lot more people can afford a mortgage, or maybe rent somewhere. And I think those are all good analogies for pricing structures.
And then I think there's also this thing about, is it a one-time upfront, or is it more pay model that is built like you pay for efficacy as you go, right? I think you can do that in countries where you don't have the type of setup that you have in the US, where there are these insurance companies where the patients move from insurance company to insurance company. But in the structure that we have in Europe, maybe that's actually possible to have.
I've lived in both places, and I'm incredulous about both systems. And here, people change their insurance companies more often than they change their socks. Yeah. And in Europe, there only is one choice, which seems equally bizarre.
Yeah.
Looking forward, what do you see? We're going to move into the looking forward, what I'd like to see in the next 5 years, what I'm fearful that I will not see in the next 5 years section of the evening as we wrap up tonight. So we'll go all the way down the panel, but I'd just like to hear a few words from you about the future goals of the Foundation Cellerator.
I would just love to see more of these clinical trials starting up. So that's one thing. I'm really looking forward to seeing some of the clinical trials that are already ongoing play out. With some clinical efficacy. I'm pretty sure that these first generation drugs, few of them will be, with fantastic efficacy, but we expect that. But hopefully there'll be enough efficacy to say, actually, this biology works. Mm-hmm. We're there. The biology actually works. Now we just need to improve it, right? Because that will also, get investors to believe a little bit more and, okay, there's actually an opportunity here. It's not that risky. The opportunity is great. Let's get going, right? And hopefully we'll see something like we've done in obesity where, there's money to be made here, and then all of a sudden that's a huge field, right? You could hope that there's some sort of hockey stick that we're waiting for.
I think that's a really important point. At Dark Horse's event at JP Morgan last week, one of the critical things that was reinforced by multiple panelists is you have to bring great clinical data to the table. Mm-hmm. It's worth refining the clinical data until you have something which is undeniably valuable, because that makes a lot of other problems melt away. And I do agree with you, there's a really encouraging number of phase 3 trials starting in this field, and we hope that their clinical packages will be compelling. Yuliia, what are you looking forward to in the next 5 years in the field? What do you want?
First of all, peace. First of all, peace. And CAR T therapy in Ukraine. First CAR T patients in Ukraine. And first in Ukrainian Christian private oncology clinic for treatment leukemia, childhood cancer.
I don't think anybody's arguing with any of those. Yeah.
Also, I am an author of book and I write about our story. If somebody want know about us, Boots 393.
Sarah.
I am incredibly encouraged by the hope that all the efforts of everybody in this room are making to make this happen. We're in this biotech revolution that's happening, and it's such a privilege to be a part of it on the front end. And particularly, I would imagine more AI will help us accelerate what's happening across the development, the discovery, the execution, and then also being able to our hospitals and treatment centers to be efficient and effective, but also the ability to partner with governments in order to be more fine-tuned and better analysis and a lot faster than the way that we're able to do it now. So I think within the next 5 years, I really believe we'll see more of that, and I hope for it.
5 years, I would like, of course, to see a treatment for the limb-girdle muscular dystrophy. I personally don't think I'll walk again. If you want to change my quality of life, strengthen my diaphragm. There's only 18 muscles. It takes you 200 muscles to walk. I would like to see manufacturing of the AAV. I know there's a lot of advancement going on there. I would like to see that drastically improved. We got to see the cost come down of the production of the AAV. And I also would, not just because of the non-viral we're starting, I would like to see non-viral just skyrocket, because Dr. Mendel also told me when I first found out about viral or non-viral from Dr. Hesterly, I got off the phone and I called Dr. Mendel. And I said, Dr. Mendel, can I do non-viral gene therapy? Because I did viral. He says, you can do non-viral. And that's what really sparked my interest in going into non-viral. And he said, Donavon, non-viral someday will overtake viral. But he says the problem is we're 20 years behind. So I'm hoping over the next 5 years, we can gain some of that 20 years. Because I know what the natural history says about my disease. It's not good.
We've come this far. We need commercial launches to follow on from the clinical successes. And I think Donovan summarized the best punch list I've heard in a long time of what needs to be done. So here's hoping that it will get done in the next 5 years or less. Thank you very much, Donovan, Sarah, Yuliia, and Bo. Thank you for your attention. I hope you enjoyed the evening, and I really hope you'll enjoy the rest of the conference here in Dallas. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.